You don't always expect it, that small ripple in the quiet, that whisper that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Sometimes it looks like a message, a line of text glowing on a screen, words that stop you mid-scroll, words that seem to know you've been waiting for something you couldn't name. Maybe you shrug it off. Maybe you laugh. But deep down, there's a part of you that doesn't laugh. A part that listens. Because something in those words feels like a key you almost remember, and so you pause. 2 minutes. 2 minutes that stretch like a lifetime. You start to wonder, what if there really are moments when the universe leans closer, when something sacred bends down to touch a human heart and say, "Wake up. You are seen." You don't need to believe in miracles for them to find you. They don't always arrive in thunder or visions. Sometimes they come disguised as ordinary seconds, a ping on your phone, a stranger's kindness, a song that plays at the right moment. The divine doesn't always announce itself with fire, sometimes it comes wrapped in the smallest coincidence. Sometimes the miracle is that you noticed it all, you read the message again. It says there is something rare coming, that you've been chosen to see it, that it's only for you. And for one heartbeat, you feel that spark of childlike wonder you forgot you still carried. You start to remember the nights you used to pray, not out of fear, but out of longing. The mornings you woke up with a sense of purpose, even when the world felt gray. You remember believing that maybe, just maybe, something beautiful was waiting just beyond the edge of your doubt. It doesn't matter whether you call it God, or love, or the universe, or the breath that made everything. What matters is that you feel it, that quiet certainty that your life is not random. That every struggle, every heartbreak, every night you thought would never end, has been a thread leading you here. You realize you've spent so long searching for signs that you forgot. The sign is always the awakening itself. You start to breathe differently. Slower. Deeper. It's like the air around you grows heavier with meaning. You feel as though something ancient is standing just behind your shoulder, not to frighten you, but to remind you that you are part of something infinite. And in that moment, you know this isn't about a deadline or a clock ticking toward 11:17 p.m. It's not about an external miracle that arrives on schedule. The miracle is that your heart just opened. Maybe this is what being chosen really means, not being lifted above others, but being lifted above your old self. Being chosen to see what was always there, the light in everything. Being chosen to stop living half asleep, to stop believing that hope is naive, to stop treating love as a luxury instead of oxygen. You think about all the people who never got this far, the ones who lost faith, who never paused to listen when life whispered. And you realize how easy it is to drown in noise, to confuse movement for meaning. But right now, you are still. You are awake. You are being reminded that something greater is already working inside you, quietly, patiently, endlessly. Maybe the message wasn't a warning or a riddle. Maybe it was an invitation to remember that you are here for a reason. To look at the world not as a problem to be solved, but as a gift to be noticed. To understand that faith isn't about certainty, it's about willingness. The willingness to keep walking even when you can't see the whole path. There's a rhythm to this awakening, like a heartbeat syncing with something vast and unseen. Every inhale says, I am alive. Every exhale says, I am grateful. And somewhere between those two breaths, a quiet voice says, I am becoming. That's the miracle you were promised. Not a flash of light in the sky, but the fire returning to your soul. You close your eyes for a moment. You can almost feel it, the pulse of creation moving through you, the same energy that paints galaxies and grows trees and heals wounds. You realize that faith isn't about reaching outward for something divine, it's about remembering that divinity has been within you all along. The message said not to tell anyone. Maybe that's because the most sacred experiences can't be shared, not really. They live inside the silence after words end. They don't demand proof, they invite transformation, and now you feel it, that pull toward something more. You start to understand that the miracle isn't waiting for you to witness it, it's waiting for you to become it. To embody the light, to live as if everything you touch is holy, to love as if love were the only real currency in the world. Because maybe that's what the divine has been begging for all along, not worship, but participation. Not fear, but courage. Not followers, but creators. Maybe God doesn't want you to believe in miracles, maybe God wants you to realize you are one. You open your eyes. The world looks the same, but it isn't. The street outside, the sound of traffic. The faint glow of your screen, it's all humming with quiet electricity. You realize you're standing in the middle of eternity disguised as an ordinary day. And maybe that's what faith really feels like, not certainty, but wonder. Not answers, but awe. You take another breath. You whisper a thank you to no one and everyone. You know that whatever happens next, something inside you has shifted forever. The message wasn't a command or a warning. It was a mirror. And what you saw in it was your own light, waiting to be remembered. The next morning, you wake up different, though nothing in your room has changed. The same ceiling greets you, the same alarm blinks, the same world outside spins on its usual axis. But somewhere deep inside, a small flame has been lit. It's not loud or dramatic. It's gentle, steady, persistent, like a heartbeat you'd forgotten how to hear. You can feel it now, even between thoughts. You rise slowly, the air cool on your skin, and you sense something invisible watching over you, not a presence in the sky, but the quiet knowing that you are being held by life itself. The world is no longer a collection of random scenes, it's a single vast organism breathing with you. You're not walking through it, you're part of it. Every sound feels like a note in the same song. You remember the message. Don't tell anyone. You think about how impossible that is, because the more you feel this, the more you want to share it. But you also understand now, the point wasn't secrecy, it was sanctity. Some things grow only in silence. Some truths need to root themselves deep inside before they're ready to bloom into words. So you carry it quietly, like a seed of light hidden behind your ribs. As you move through the day, the world starts to test you. The noise returns: traffic, deadlines, irritation, the endless tug of distractions. For a moment, you feel that flicker of light start to fade. But then, you catch yourself. You remember the breath. You remember the voice that said you are seen, chosen, alive. And you realize the test isn't from outside. It's within. The challenge isn't to keep the world peaceful, it's to keep your soul peaceful within the world. That's when you start to understand what true strength means. Not the kind that conquers, but the kind that endures. Not the strength to dominate others, but the strength to remain gentle in the face of cruelty. To keep your heart open when it would be easier to close. To keep believing in goodness when cynicism feels like armor. You see now that every act of kindness is a miracle in disguise. The smile you give to a stranger, the patience you find when anger tempts you, the forgiveness you choose even when no one apologizes, these are small revolutions of light. The world may never applaud them, but heaven does. Faith, you realize, isn't a single moment of revelation, it's a daily decision. Every morning, you decide to believe in what you cannot see. Every night, you choose to trust that your unseen efforts matter. And in that invisible space between trying and believing, life happens. You start noticing beauty where you never looked before. The rhythm of footsteps, the shape of clouds, the laughter of a child, they all feel like reminders of a greater harmony you're part of. You realize how many miracles you've walked past because you were too busy waiting for one to announce itself. Maybe that's what it means to wake up spiritually, not to escape the world, but to finally see it. To see that the ordinary is extraordinary when you stop demanding it to impress you. The sunlight falling through leaves. The way the rain sounds like forgiveness. The silence after someone says, "It's okay, I understand." These are the quiet moments where heaven brushes against earth. At night, you lie in bed thinking about all the times you've been broken. The disappointments, the betrayals, the prayers that seemed unanswered. And for the first time, you feel gratitude instead of bitterness. Because every pain carved space for something sacred to enter. Every wound became an opening for grace. You start to see that maybe it all had to happen, not because you deserved suffering, but because you were meant to grow into someone capable of carrying light through it. You think about how many times you've waited for signs, and how often the signs were already in motion, disguised as challenges, as endings, as closed doors that were actually redirections. You realize that maybe you were never waiting for God to show up. Maybe God was waiting for you to slow down enough to notice that He never left, and it hits you. The miracle isn't in seeing something supernatural. It's in understanding that everything is already supernatural. Every atom is a prayer. Every heartbeat is a hymn. Every person you meet is a reflection of the same divine spark learning to recognize itself. You start walking differently. You stop rushing through moments. You start listening when people speak, not just to their words, but to their silences. You begin to see pain in others not as something to judge, but as something to hold with compassion. You realize that your purpose was never to fix the world, but to love it until it remembers how to heal itself. And every time you forget, because you will forget, life will send you another reminder. A stranger's kindness. A quiet sunrise. A message that appears out of nowhere. And you'll smile, because you'll know it's not about the message itself, but about the one who's listening. You start to understand why the message said it would happen before 11:17 p.m. Because time was never the point was urgency. The sense that now is the only sacred moment that ever exists. That awakening doesn't happen tomorrow, or when life gets easier, or when you're finally ready. It happens now, in this breath, in this heartbeat, in this unrepeatable instant, so you close your eyes and say quietly, "I'm ready." Not because you know what's coming, but because you trust that whatever comes will be part of your becoming. You've learned that faith isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to walk forward while fear trembles beside you. And maybe that's the real miracle, not that you were chosen to witness something rare, but that you finally chose yourself. Chose to rise, to believe, to begin again. You begin to move through life with a quieter kind of confidence. Not the loud, performative sort that needs applause, but the steady calm of someone who knows where they stand even when the ground trembles. You don't need to convince anyone of anything anymore, you only need to live it. Every action, every word, becomes a small act of alignment between the person you once were and the person you are becoming. You notice that the world mirrors your energy. When you move with gratitude, doors seem to open. When you lead with bitterness, even sunlight feels heavy. It's not magic, it's awareness. The world doesn't change because you command it to, it changes because you finally see what was always responding to you. The shift was never outside. It was always within. Some days are still hard. You still wake up tired, still face the same responsibilities, still feel waves of doubt. But now, you face them differently. You meet them like old friends who have something to teach you. You start asking every hardship, "What are you trying to show me?" And the answers come, sometimes quickly, sometimes through silence, but they come. You stop chasing perfection. You start chasing presence. There's a huge difference. Perfection isolates, presence connects. When you're present, even mistakes become sacred because they remind you that you're alive, experimenting, learning, evolving. You understand that growth doesn't come from always being right, but from always being willing. At work, at home, in every crowded room, you carry an invisible peace. It's not constant, nothing in this world is, but it returns easily when you remember the breath. One deep inhale can pull you back into alignment. One moment of stillness can reset an entire day. People begin to notice. They can't explain it, but they feel calmer around you. You've become a living prayer, not because you preach, but because you embody what you once only spoke about. Love starts to flow more freely too, not the fragile love that demands to be returned, but the kind that gives because giving is its own reward. You learn that loving someone doesn't mean owning them or fixing them, it means seeing their light even when they can't. It means standing beside them when the storm hits, not to shield them from pain, but to remind them they're strong enough to stand through it. You begin to forgive yourself. For all the years you wasted trying to please everyone. For all the times you stayed silent when your soul wanted to speak. For the moments you let fear decide who you would be. You realize forgiveness isn't a one-time act, it's a daily ritual of releasing the weight that no longer belongs to you. Sometimes, while walking alone, you catch yourself smiling for no reason. You can feel the hum of existence under your feet, like the earth itself is alive and listening. You realize how many lifetimes you might have wandered to arrive at this single understanding, that joy isn't something to find. It's something to remember. You begin to trust the timing of your life. The waiting no longer feels like punishment. It feels like preparation. You stop comparing your path to others because you finally see that every soul blooms in its own season. You learn patience not as resignation, but as partnership with time. You know that what is meant for you cannot miss you if you keep showing up with an open heart, and when loss comes, because it will, you meet it differently. You no longer ask, "Why me?" You ask, "What now?" You allow grief to wash through you without shame, without the need to rush it away. You know that pain doesn't mean you've lost the light, it means you're being stretched to hold more of it. You start to see that every ending is a disguised beginning. The job that fell apart made room for a truer calling. The friendship that faded left space for authenticity. The version of yourself that you mourned is quietly dissolving so that something freer can emerge. You realize you're not losing pieces of yourself. You're shedding layers that can't travel where you're going. In quiet moments, you whisper small promises to the universe. I will keep showing up. I will keep choosing love. I will keep believing, even when it hurts. And somehow, the universe answers, not in words, but in synchronicities. A song plays at the perfect moment. A stranger's smile lifts your mood. A delayed plan turns out to save you from harm. These aren't coincidences anymore, they're the gentle choreography of grace reminding you that you're not alone in this dance. You understand now that being chosen doesn't make you special. It makes you responsible. Responsible to keep the light moving, to keep hope alive in spaces where others have given up. You realize that everyone is chosen, but only a few choose to answer the call. You have. And that changes everything. When you sit in stillness, you can feel the vastness of it all, the stars spinning above, the oceans breathing below, the pulse of life threading through every atom. It humbles you. It also empowers you. Because if the same force that moves galaxies lives within you, then no challenge is insurmountable, no dream too distant. You start living from that knowing. You stop saying someday. You start saying today. You stop waiting for permission. You stop dimming your brilliance to make others comfortable. You begin to walk like someone who finally remembers they are made of stardust and purpose. Every step becomes a prayer of gratitude. The world still trembles, still argues, still hurts itself, but you no longer drown in that noise. You become an anchor of calm in the storm. You start helping others find that same stillness, not by preaching, but by presence. You realize that the greatest gift you can offer the world is the example of a peaceful heart. And so, the message that once startled you has become a way of being. It's no longer a mysterious command, it's a melody that lives in your bones. You hear it in laughter, in silence, in every sunrise that greets you with the same quiet invitation: be awake. Be alive. Be love. When the light inside you grows steady, it doesn't make life perfect, it makes life true. You begin to understand that every day is a workshop for the soul. Every encounter, every inconvenience, every moment of joy or pain is material for transformation. You stop running from experiences. You meet them head-on, curious about what they might carve or soften in you. You find yourself paying attention to small details again. The warmth of a mug in your hands. The way dust glows in a shaft of sunlight. The smell of rain on the pavement. These are the same things you once ignored, yet now they feel like secret letters addressed to you by existence itself. You start writing mental thank you notes to the ordinary. Gratitude becomes less of a practice and more of a reflex. At work, you bring presence instead of pressure. You listen more than you speak. You realize that leadership isn't control, it's service. People begin to sense something different about you. Not a forced optimism, but a grounded peace that quietly steadies the room. You've stopped chasing validation because you've already found value. Your worth is no longer measured by approval, it's measured by alignment. Creativity begins to return like an old friend. You paint again, or sing, or write, or cook, or simply imagine. You no longer create to impress, you create to express. You realize that creativity is prayer in motion, the universe experiencing itself through your hands. You don't need to be an artist to live creatively, you only need to live awake. Every act of care, every problem solved with compassion, every laugh shared becomes a brushstroke on the canvas of being. You start helping others, quietly, without fanfare. You give what you can, a smile, a listening ear, a small kindness, and you learn that generosity isn't about how much you give but how open your heart remains. The joy that comes from helping others no longer feels like a transaction, it feels like breathing. You realize that love, once it flows through you freely, replenishes itself endlessly. Some nights you sit alone and wonder if it's enough, this ordinary miracle of living with purpose. And then something inside whispers, yes, this is enough. Because the point was never to be grand, it was to be genuine. To show up fully human and let the divine move through that humanness. You understand now that enlightenment doesn't lift you above life, it roots you deeper into it. You begin to notice how connected everything truly is. A kind word spoken here softens anger over there. A single act of patience prevents a chain of harm. You see how every gentle decision echoes outward. The old you wanted to change the whole world at once. The new you knows that changing one moment at a time is changing the world. Sometimes, doubt returns. Sometimes the flame flickers. You forget. You slip, you lose patience. And yet, you always come back. Because now you know where home is, not a place, but a presence. You breathe, and the presence returns. You forgive yourself, and the peace returns. You smile, and life smiles back. You begin to see that miracles are not interruptions of the natural order, they are the natural order, only seen clearly. The more you notice them, the more they multiply. It's not that the world suddenly changes, it's that your eyes have healed. You start walking as if the ground beneath you is sacred, because in truth, it always was. You find meaning in service, in small honest work, in lifting others quietly. You begin to mentor, to teach, to comfort, not because you think you have the answers, but because you remember what it felt like to be lost. You share warmth, not wisdom, presence, not perfection. That's enough. The world doesn't need more flawless teachers, it needs more open hearts. The more you give, the more peace you feel. You realize that purpose isn't a destination waiting at the end of a long road, it's the energy that fuels every step. To live purposefully isn't to chase a single mission, it's to bring meaning to whatever stands before you. Even folding laundry, making dinner, caring for someone ill, all of it becomes prayer when done with love, and now you see that the message you once received was never about a single night or deadline. It was an awakening disguised as urgency, a way to shake you from numbness. It told you that something rare was coming, but the rarity was this: the moment you truly paid attention. Once you did, the miracle was already complete. You start meeting people who are still waiting for their own sign, and you smile gently. You tell them they already have it, that the longing itself is the sign. You remind them that they're not late, not forgotten, not broken beyond repair. You show them, through your calm presence, that the divine doesn't need to shout, it whispers. And in that whisper, everything they need is hidden. You start to understand that legacy has nothing to do with monuments or memory. It isn't measured by how loudly the world remembers your name, but by how softly your love lingers after you leave a room. Legacy is the echo of kindness that keeps moving long after the original gesture has dissolved. You don't need to be famous to matter, you only need to be present to those right in front of you. When you speak, people listen differently because you're not trying to convince them. Your words carry the weight of lived peace. You tell stories that make people feel seen. You stop trying to impress with knowledge, you start to connect through honesty. You learn that truth spoken gently has more power than certainty shouted from a stage. You begin to see that the universe loves small beginnings. A single smile can change the day of someone who will go on to comfort another. A small act of forgiveness can stop generations of hurt. You realize you'll never know how far your ripples reach, and that's the beauty of it. You're not here to count the results, you're here to pour yourself into the river and trust it will flow where it's needed. Each morning feels like a fresh invitation. You wake up and whisper, "Use me today." Not as a martyr, but as a vessel of grace. You find yourself drawn to people in need, sometimes in words, sometimes in silence. You begin to see service not as sacrifice but as participation in the great circulation of love. What you give returns in unexpected forms: calmness, clarity, joy. You notice that your definition of success has changed completely. It's no longer about achievement, but alignment. You measure success by how peaceful you feel when you lay your head down at night. By whether you lived truthfully, whether you were kind when you could have been cruel, whether you stayed open when life tried to close you. Everything else fades into background noise. Even in moments of solitude, you no longer feel alone. You sense the living network of everything: ancestors, strangers, stars, leaves, all breathing together. You understand that existence is communal. Even silence is shared. You start to talk less and listen more, because you realize that the universe is always speaking. Always guiding, always waiting for an attentive heart. Sometimes you remember who you used to be: anxious, striving, uncertain, and instead of shame, you feel tenderness. That version of you wasn't wrong, they were necessary. They were the seed. You realize that every previous version of yourself was doing the best they could with the light they had. You thank them, release them, and step forward a little lighter. You stop asking life for guarantees. You start asking for growth. You understand that the safest path is rarely the most alive one. So you take small risks, saying the vulnerable thing, taking the leap of faith, loving again after loss. Each risk reminds you that courage and fear are twin currents of the same river. You don't need to erase fear, you only need to keep moving through it. Over time, your calm becomes contagious. The people around you begin to mirror it. Arguments soften. Homes grow quieter. Children feel safer. Without trying, you've become a lighthouse, not by shining at anyone, but by staying lit regardless of the storm. And you realize that maybe that's all the world ever needed, one steady flame to remind others that light is possible. You begin to meet others who are awakening in their own ways. There's recognition in your eyes, like travelers meeting on the same long road. You don't need to explain, you just understand. Together, you begin to build small circles of kindness, communities of quiet strength. Not movements with slogans, but gatherings of souls who simply agree to live gently. The world may never notice, but the earth feels it, and so does heaven. As the years unfold, you keep discovering new depths of simplicity. You stop needing to fix yourself because you realize there was never anything wrong, only parts of you that hadn't yet been loved. You start finding beauty in aging, in imperfection, in the slow rhythm of days. You stop trying to chase meaning, you start embodying it. One evening, you sit watching the sunset, and it occurs to you that this, the color, the quiet, the heart beating steadily inside your chest, is what the message meant all along. The miracle wasn't waiting somewhere else, it was happening the moment you finally noticed that you were part of it. Every sunset is an ending and a beginning, every breath a miniature resurrection. You realize that heaven has been unfolding around you, one moment at a time. You feel an immense gratitude rise through you, not for what you've gained, but for what you've understood, that to be alive is the rarest miracle of all, and to love within that aliveness is the purest form of worship. You smile. Close your eyes, and whisper, "Thank you." The night air answers with silence, but it's a living silence, full of peace. You don't need more proof than this. You know now that every message, every sign, every coincidence was pointing you here, to the quiet joy of simply being, to the endless work of gentle love. And in that knowing, you rest.